All right, guys, let's switch gears to China. All right. Now, here's what, unfortunately, what we have to try to do sometimes. We have to try to oversimplify things. And like I said, by doing our little 4M, acronym right here, we kind of are oversimplifying it to say, oh, we just have to know about the Ming Dynasty during this time. That's not really the case. Hopefully what the Ming Dynasty can do, though, is kind of trigger in our minds the general chronology of Chinese history. Now, I will say that one of the important factors to do, one of the really important skills for you guys to have, is to be able to put together the general chronology, and if you want to do it by kind of remembering the different dynasties, that sometimes is quite helpful here. So what we did, we went over this in class probably in about December or so, okay? And basically what this was is we put together the big kind of like transition between all the Chinese dynasties that we had talked about so far. So I don't need us necessarily to review this old stuff here because we kind of have already done this review. You got this?
No, it doesn't have song.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there's a Chinese dynasty song on there as well.
How does it go?
Well, you get to make the tune for it, George. That's the.
No, I don't sing.
Some other teacher utilized it, and that's why it's kind of thrown in there. All right, so the early stuff we had talked about, again, this is kind of recap and review the Shashang and the Su. We had taken a look at the period of warring states, the arrival of the Qin and the Han Dynasty. Remember, for the Qin and the Han Dynasty, be thinking about the Silk Roads, be thinking about keeping nomadic people out, be thinking about, with the Qin and the Han Dynasty, the problems they had with land distribution, and all of the different comparisons that you would make between the Han Dynasty and the Roman Empire. Well, where we had sort of left off then last time was that between 200 and roughly 590 in China, between 200 and 590, we go into a second period of really no central government in China. All right? We sometimes call this the period of warring states part 2. This is a period of time where, again, there's no dynasty in China for this period of time. Okay? Now, what happens during this roughly 400-year time frame? Big important things to think about in China between 200 and 590 is we've got the arrival of Buddhism, we have the collapse of the Roman Empire, the rise of the Byzantine Empire, and obviously this is the time when the Silk Roads and the spread of Buddhism is going to be very, very huge. What we generally have said about China is that times of great chaos and times of great instability is typically when they're more apt to maybe take in something, or just people in general are more apt to take in something as far as like a ruling philosophy in terms of like a religion to have them hold on to it. Okay? So, where we want to pick up then for this unit here. So starting in like the 600, this is another good reason why they like starting this unit in the year 600, is look at what we have here in China. In the year 590, we have the reestablishment of centralized rule in China. Okay, so that's one of the reasons why they kind of like to start us there. So why don't we do this? Just kind of basing it off of this and some other stuff we'll put up on the board here. If you guys want to take your name 5 charts, let's go to East Asia real quick and kind of talk about what maybe the significant stuff we can kind of find out at East Asia and what we should maybe put down as far as our list is concerned. All right. So very first, why don't we put down for East Asia probably the first 2 important dynasties that come about right around the year 600 or so. And as you saw right here, the first 3 we have are the Sui, the Tang, and the Song. Now, for our purposes, I want to make this a little bit easier for you guys. You're probably not going to see questions on the Sui dynasty in China, so let's just kind of put it down even slower to the Tang and the Song. Okay? So if you can put that down on the list as the Tang and the Song dynasties as coming about during this time frame. Okay? That's kind of where we can kind of start things.
The Tang goes bad.
All right, so what sort of things on the Tang and the Song dynasties do we want to think about? All right, well up there on our list, the Tang and the Song dynasties, we have a strong government for the very first time in quite some time, as it kind of suggests there. All right, some other characteristics that maybe are part of the game right there as well is the establishment or the reestablishment of Confucianism. Okay, the establishment, or we want to call it the reestablishment of Confucianism. So let's go ahead and put that down on our list here as well. All right, the Confucianist model for education. Now, this is going to bring up some questions. Why do the Chinese feel so strongly about Confucianism at this time? What do they feel like that gives them? What do they feel like that? Why is that good for society? What does it do for you?
Better government.
Gives you a better government. Confucianism, one of the core concepts of Confucianism is that it trains government bureaucrats for service in the government. It makes for a great society, hopefully. It makes it instills characteristics in people that look out for and respect their elders, for instance, respect for family members, but ultimately it is going to create a good government, and then we're going to have a strong, well-adept government that's able to kind of, obviously not have China have a whole lot of problems, but also solve those problems if they do end up kind of coming up. So we're going to say the Confucianist model for education is going to be very key. As we had said, parents wanted their kids to get the Confucianist style of education. That would mean a solid job, that would mean a good job for the rest of their life, a pension. Remember, what do parents want for their kids in some cases too here?
When they get old and useless, they want their kids to get back.
Kind of harsh. But yeah, you're right, older, not old people are useless, but you know.
I didn't say that.
But when they do get older, they want their kids to be able to take care of them. That provides a very good way for that to take place. All right, some other stuff we can throw down for the Chinese situation right here as well. Every time you see the word tang, what is that thing I always told you to try to remember with tang? Tang goes bang. So what does that mean comes about in China at this time?
Gunpowder.
Gunpowder. So let's put down some of their technologies and their good stuff here. Gunpowder. Gunpowder invented this time. Remember the Chinese originally invented gunpowder for fireworks purposes? As it spreads, though, throughout the rest of the world, people start to adapt it and utilize it for wartime endeavors and whatnot. So gunpowder technology is first. All right, besides gunpowder, we say the Tang and Song dynasties are not just good with gunpowder, but they're good with some other stuff too. What else do we got? All right, porcelain. Okay, porcelain's going to be huge because people are going to want to come from very, very far away to be able to get the Chinese porcelain technology and the great products that you can make out of porcelain. So that's going to obviously be huge. All right, so we got the gunpowder, we got the porcelain. Silk is still going to be very big, so we can put that down on the list too. Silk is going to be huge. All right. As something that comes out of this era here, or comes out of this location. The other stuff we want to put on here, though, that comes out of China, is we want to say the compass, and we want to also put paper. Remember, this was the, you remember doing this one assignment or set of notes in this class where it was like we had all these technologies from the Eastern world, and you had to put down like where it came from? Remember how it was like one of those things where if it, like the answer of where it came from, it was like 90% of the time it comes from China. Not all of the stuff is coming from China, but by and large, most of your famous and really influential technologies at the time were all coming from China. Okay, so that's going to be a good place to sort of start. All right, another thing that does come out here, if we're thinking about just related products. Now, not all these products are related. Gunpowder isn't really like silk, isn't like a compass. Some of them are technologies. Some of them are trade goods, more or less, and other things that kind of come out of this era as well. Wholeheartedly different. So let's put the other one down that is coming from this time frame, which is foot binding. Who's our foot binding lovers? The people that just love looking at the pictures.
The wealthy.
Who's the one who? I remember we had some people that just like couldn't that's right. Couldn't absolutely look at the pictures, right? You remember the whole status of foot binding? Remember what type of girls got foot binded?
Wealthy.
Wealthy, because foot binding was a designation to show off your wealth, right? Not to show off your feet necessarily. It's to show off your wealth, right? If a wealthy girl is footbound and is not faced with the tasks of having to actually care for her, so she obviously is wealthy enough to be able to have somebody else care for her. It shows and demonstrates her wealth here. Okay, so that's going to be the big element of that. Okay, the last couple things that we want to put on. So gunpowder, porcelain, silk, compass, paper, foot binding. The other just general stuff we maybe want to put on here is Chinese administration, the way the Chinese ran their government, Confucianist models, all of that stuff. Now the reason why we put this all together in one list, okay, is because when generally a country is doing really, really well, and they come up with all of these great things, you have gunpowder, all these great different technologies, all these great different influential things, what do they generally tend to do with all of this stuff then? Leave it for themselves?
Trade.
They trade and they influence others. Now, do you guys remember some places, some neighbors around them who picked these things up? Who was it?
Japan.
The Japanese. All right, and not just the Japanese, but also, if you remember that one particular essay we wrote a compare and contrast essay in like December. Korea, Japan, and Vietnam were all influenced by these places. So let's just put down for another one right here that Korea, Japan, and Vietnam basically all influenced. So in other words, all of these products, all of these characteristics, all rub off on some of their neighbors. And another thing we didn't even put on the list right here, but what's the other characteristic that also gets spread to all of these places? It didn't come from China, but China had it at this time. Was Buddhism. Buddhism spreads to these places at the same time as well. So just kind of think about China is kind of the is the method by which a lot of this stuff kind of gets spread and transferred to some of these places all around the rest of the world, all right, or at least in their region. Okay, some other stuff we can go ahead and put on the list. This one might be a little bit tight as well. Like I said, we've done about 4 of them. Let's put a couple other things. The very bottom of the list. If we talk actually, by the way, about Japan, maybe we can put as a little offshoot of Japan. They kind of had a unique government of their own during the 900s, year 1000, 1100. What is Japan doing at this time? Before they get, so they do get the Neo-Confucianist values, and they do kind of pick up Confucianism. You're right. But something Japan kind of had going on the side for themselves. Remember what Japan's government looked like? It was kind of similar to another government on the opposite side of the world, actually. They were feudal. Do you guys remember talking about Japanese feudalism? Okay. Let me just pop up something real quick here that might demonstrate the... where do we want to go? This one right here. Remember this fun here? Japanese feudalism, we had said that it was actually very, very similar in a lot of respects to that which was going on in Europe at this point in time. Remember just the names and the people and the characteristics are a little bit different. But you remember our general format here of Japanese feudalism, all right? If we were to say, for instance, like who are the landowners in Japanese feudalism, you'd be able to say, who? The daimyo, right? Samurai are the warriors. They're like the, as we said, they're kind of like the European knights, peasants, and so forth. So that was our example, basically, of Japanese feudalism and all the stuff as far as like the impact from China. Okay. All right. And finally, the last, maybe one that we can put up on the list right here as well. But something happens to China here. Something happens to China at the end of the Song Dynasty. Really kind of messes them up, really kind of influences them not for the better here. But something happens at the end of the Song Dynasty that kind of ends it for them, and it happens in the year 1279. What happens to China?
They get invaded.
They get invaded, right? They get invaded, and what we're just going to call this now is Mongol rule. Okay? The Mongols come in and take over in the year 1279. Okay? And that's kind of the place that we'll sort of leave off this, this particular part, okay? The influence and the arrival of the Mongols, okay?
Let's talk about Mongols.
All right, so let's go next into, let's see here. Let's go next into the Mongols for a quick second. I think, let's see here. Now that pretty much ends it there. What do we want to put on? Let's put on this one here real quick. All right, so again, we're all looking at things that we've kind of checked out before. But let's go and kind of take a look real quick here at the Mongols. If we're going to check out the Mongols, what part of the world here, which part of these boxes is going to be really kind of like hard hit with the Mongols? Which geographic area? Probably that one at the bottom that says North and Central Asia, all right, is going to be kind of like the center strong piece for the Mongols. So, and we don't really necessarily need to put a lot on our chart for the Mongols here. I'm going to put a couple extra things on the notes over here. But as far as our name 5 charts go, if you guys want to look at the very bottom where it says North and Central Asia, Russia plus the stands, why don't we just very, very simply put down that this is going to be the arrival and the influence of the Mongols, which obviously are part of what we call steppe nomads.
Okay, where are we putting them?
Just down for North and Central Asia on the bottom.
I got you.
North Central Asia and Russia. Mongols / the steppe nomads, all right? And what I want to do is be a little bit more detailed maybe, and we'll put a couple just quick little hitters as far as like characteristics of the Mongol Yuan dynasty, see if you guys kind of remember some of this stuff as far as when it starts, when it ends. This was a dates quiz date actually. The era of the Mongol Empire was 1279, so I remember when it
1368.
Very good, George. 1368. You guys remember doing that one? 1279 to 1368, all right? So, 1279 to 1368, we got the Mongols, okay? Let's keep in mind for the Mongols, and you can add, because you got a little bit of space on your name 5 charts, that we can maybe put down a couple characteristics, like number 1, make sure you understand that this is called the Yuan dynasty. You guys all remember that? The Mongols is called the Yuan dynasty. We call it a Chinese dynasty, but really, is it a Chinese dynasty necessarily?
It's a Mongol. They kick out Chinese.
They're separate, right? They're definitely ethnically separate from the Chinese in a lot of respects. So let's kind of check this out as far as the Mongols. What are some characteristics, just very simply, about the beginning of Mongol rule here? Some things that we just know about them from when they kind of started. What do we say
Well,
about
they
them?
like are on horses.
Alright, so they're on horses. No permanent settlement. That gives us the characteristic that these guys are nomadic, right? Their culture is a warrior-based culture, right? Their culture is based on military prowess. It's based on expansionism. It's based on success in the battlefield. So we always said these guys are, they're nomadic in their sense. They're nomadic, obviously, in their nature here, okay? Alright, so early spread of the Mongols, as we had said. On horseback they conquered. Who's kind of like our founder of the Mongols? Some individuals to think about.
Genghis Khan.
Alright, Genghis Khan being kind of like the founder of the Mongol, the beginnings anyway of the Mongol rule. Who's Genghis Khan's grandson then? You remember who that was?
No.
Genghis Khan's grandson. Remember his, what did you say? Yeah, so we have a couple different names for him here, but if you remember, Genghis Khan's grandson was this guy by the name of Kublai Khan, and there's a couple of different names for this here, but ultimately what we go from is we go from Genghis Khan ultimately down to Kublai Khan.
Didn't he promote
Alright.
Buddhism?
Now, a couple different things that Kublai Khan does, alright, and this is maybe a guy that you want to put down on this one as well, because he's going to be a significant individual, alright, but go ahead and put down the name Kublai Khan, and some of the things that he does. Kublai Khan is the guy that brings the Mongol Empire to its greatest extent, alright. The other thing Kublai Khan does, which is kind of crazy, thinking about like the ruling nature of the Mongols, is that he actually was Buddhist. And you're right, he actually did promote Buddhism across this area, which is kind of, you know, the peaceful, peace-loving nature of Buddhism doesn't seem like it goes hand in hand necessarily with the Mongols. But nevertheless, he does that. The other type of questions you might get on this, and we actually wrote a little bit of the beginnings of an essay on this, is the ways, actually no, we didn't write this essay, years past we actually did this, we didn't do it this year though. One of the questions though that sometimes they might ask is they might say something about how did the Mongols rule the places that they conquered differently? You guys remember the general characteristics of that? Like, for instance, when the Mongols ruled in Persia, they took over Persia, what was kind of the ruling characteristics they had on those guys? It was a little bit more on the nice side of things, right? They actually adopted a lot of Persian administrative techniques. They actually, some Mongols actually converted to Islam, as a matter of fact. It was actually a little bit more amicable, right? Some other areas, not as well. What would we say, though, if we're talking about China here? What's the nature by which the Mongols rule in China? All right, really, really super harsh rule. So as a matter of fact, what we can basically say is that while the Mongols rule in China, the Mongol Yuan dynasty in place, the one characteristic that we want to say is that what happens to Chinese culture? What happens to Chinese culture?
Trash.
It gets trashed. Chinese culture goes way down. Mongols come in and they basically instill their, not only their form of culture, but their form of ruling, and they basically say anything Chinese is horrible, is bad. So you see some examples. Remember they put in place, for instance, the concepts that Chinese clothing styles and stuff are outlawed. Chinese language cannot be spoken in official government business. You have to only speak the official, language, basically is the Mongol court language, as they called it. All of these characteristics are done away with. What did they do with Confucianism? Confucianist education. Got rid of it, right? So they get rid of all these characteristics that deal with anything to do with Chinese culture. It's a trash of Chinese culture. And essentially they just use China for its resources in a lot of respects. Okay? So these are some of the things that we had sort of looked at, some of the characteristics of their rule. See if there's a couple other things on our old notes that we did not really kind of go into. As we had basically said, over time, the Mongols were pretty good at adopting culture from other places. The only thing that they didn't really do, though, is they didn't really adopt culture from the Chinese. They really took it in as long as it was sent to anybody who was not Chinese. All right, some other stuff that we had basically said. I want to get to the very, very end of this. We'll come to Marco Polo a little bit later. I guess we'll go back to our map for right now. The last thing to maybe kind of put in for all of this is let's talk real quickly about the demise of the Mongols in terms of how they rule. So let's just put this down. Let's put down the word demise, and let's say the things that kind of like dropped them off or kind of like made them not very effective. One thing we know in terms of conquering, these guys were very, very good, very effective conquerors, right? What are they not very good at, though?
Governing.
They were really good at ruling or governing or administering the empire, right? So as far as the demise goes, why don't we say that they're basically kind of like bad, ineffective rulers. They're not good at ruling. They're good at conquering. They always said that quote, you can conquer an empire on horseback, but you can't govern an empire on horseback.
In one of my essays.
So they're not very effective in that respect. So not very strong rulers. Some other stuff that happens that hits bad here is they have bad financial problems. So you can say something about finances, kind of hit a snag, all right? Less tax revenue coming in, not very effective rule, obviously, that's a bad thing. And then there's one other thing that starts to happen in about the 1340s, 1350s, that pretty much affects anybody and everybody in this whole part of the world. And this is going to be another big, you could probably put this one actually down, as a matter of fact, in North Central Asia name chart. You could probably put it also on the European one. Something else hits the entire world here, and the Mongols help spread it. The plague, absolutely. So let's put down the plague. Okay, Black Death or the Black Plague. And kind of close that out basically in this part of the world as far as being the connecting piece that really kind of leads to demise in a lot of different areas. Okay, the Black Plague. All right, so I know we didn't put that under Europe, but you guys can obviously see as well that in the 1350s, this is when the Black Plague does come to Western Europe and is going to demise, cause the demise of this very, very large segment, very large area. If you were to get a question, what area in the world actually was hit hardest by the plague? Like, who had the most deaths in the entire world? China actually did, right? China had more deaths out of the plague than anybody else. Who was the one country, one place that was not really hit by the plague?
India.
All that much. Yeah, it was India. There's not really a lot of good reasons for why India wasn't hit, but the plague kind of did bypass it altogether, and people weren't affected there in as great a much severity. Okay? But all points in between, the Black Plague is going to hit people. Black Plague is, in essence, the first kind of major example when you're talking about major long-distance connections, and then in essence that's kind of what the Mongols were. They were the people that were connecting far-off places in the world. They're kind of responsible for spreading the plague, more or less, to some of these new places and some of these new areas that, more or less had not had them spread to before. Okay? All right, so that's kind of where we stop that particular part. Does anybody have any questions on kind of any of that thus far? All right, let's go to the next part then. Let's go over to the following side on the right. After the Mongols are gone, the Yuan dynasty is done, what we're going to see happen then next is what we're going to say the arrival of what's called the Ming dynasty. Now this one, as we said, kind of goes on our list here. Now, like I say, the Ming dynasty isn't more important than the Song and the Tang, but at least if you can think Ming, hopefully that can put you into the context of Mongols and what was happening kind of before the Mongols as well. So as far as the Ming dynasty is concerned, what's like a couple of things maybe we can say or put down about the Ming dynasty? What were they all about when they came into power in the 1360s here? Yeah, Jack?
Restoring ancient Chinese.
Absolutely. So restore Chinese culture. All right, so do you have, under East Asia, you're probably all booked up under East Asia, right?
Yeah,
Pretty much. That's okay. If you want to sort of put this in a place of your choosing, kind of, you can put this in a spot that hopefully kind of makes the most sense for you. If you have a little bit of spot at the end of the East Asia section, though, you might want to just put down Ming Dynasty at the end of East Asia, just so we know that that's happening, if that transition's taking place here. All right? So we've got the Ming Dynasty. As Jack said, they're going to do everything to restore Chinese culture. They're going to bring Chinese culture back. All right? They're going to do so in as many ways as possible. Do you guys remember a couple of the people in the Ming Dynasty who are doing that? There's a few of them. Zheng He is a member of the Ming Dynasty, all right, for some of the things that he does. Anybody else?
Seventh Age, dude.
Yep. Anybody else you kind of remember? You remember the guy named like Ming Yongle?
Oh, yep.
Yep.
What did Ming Yongle write?
The Yongle Encyclopedia.
He wrote Yongle's Encyclopedia to help promote, obviously, the nature of Chinese culture here. I'm going to flick the lights on here real quick so you can see this a little better. Sound good? Watch your eyes. Okay. Okay. Restore Chinese culture. Ming Yongle. You remember there was another guy named Ming Hongwu? I don't think you're going to have, they're not going to trick you on guys like this or anything like that, but if there's anybody with a Ming before their name, all right, that tells us that they come out of this era and that they're going to be very big, obviously, into promoting Chinese culture. All right, what's the other big thing that they bring back? If we love Chinese culture, the thing that Chinese feel very strongly about is Confucianism and the Confucianist education system. Okay, so Confucianist education is brought back. That is back on the scene right here. It's going to be very, very important. And the last thing that we're going to put on the list here as well, that was also part of the big deal, as far as an individual is concerned, is let's put down the name of the guy, Zheng He. All right, how much do we feel like we remember about Zheng He? Zilch, really?
He explored Africa.
He was the Christopher Columbus of Asia.
Wait,
right?
what was the other guy? I'm thinking
What other guy? A Chinese guy or?
yeah, a guy who had the huge ships.
That's Zheng He. No, that's him.
Alright.
That's him. That's Jingha, the big treasure ship. See if I've got, let's see
Can
here.
you bring back giraffes and stuff?
That is right. That is right. So let's take a quick look here. That would have been, oh, if we have to go back here. What is Jingha? Is he chapter 18? Nah, 22. Alright, let's just throw this up here so you see some things that maybe you've kind of seen before here. Alright, our friend Jingha. I like to throw this on here and take a closer look at this in review sessions because you will get a question, or probably more than one question, on Jingha. You gotta know, alright? He's gonna be a super important guy to know, very, very significant for a lot of different reasons. What we said about Jingha, he was an admiral during the Ming Dynasty. Now remember what the Ming Dynasty is all about. The Ming Dynasty is like, we're so happy, we're throwing parties, we're so exuberant that the Mongols are gone. We're so much into promoting Chinese culture.